The atom motor is famous for its educational design, aimed at developing technology by first understanding its nature. The original model of the atom motor is a classical electromechanical system. This motor also functions as a generator by combining the induction motor model with that of a generator, meaning it is both a motor and a generator at the same time. In the electromechanical model, an electric pulse is applied precisely to accelerate the flywheel. As the flywheel spins at high speed, magnets attached to it pass by a coil, generating free energy when velocity is boosted by a large amount of input energy. Here's how it works. When the magnet on the flywheel approaches the iron core, the coil generates an electromotive force, EMF, but both ends of the coil remain open because the Hall effect IC has not yet triggered. As the magnet gets closer, the Hall IC starts to activate. However, since the voltage at the transistor's B, base pin, is still higher than at the E, emitter pin, the transistor remains off and the coil circuit stays open. When the magnet reaches the exact center of the iron core and the coil wrapped around it, the voltage at the B pin is still higher than at the E pin, keeping the transistor off. At this point, something special occurs, something rarely discussed. The iron core becomes fully magnetized, and the magnetic flux through the core stops changing. The magnetic field of the core to collapse exactly when the magnet crosses the center. This creates a reverse EMF. At that moment, the voltage at the transistor's emitter suddenly becomes much higher, making the base voltage relatively lower. As a result, the transistor switches on. Thus, both the Hall IC and the NPN transistor unlock at the precise moment the magnet crosses the center. The magnetic flux now reverses direction, producing a repelling force instead of an attractive one. Normal motors usually operate with attractive forces as magnets seek equilibrium. However, adding the Hall IC and the transistor reverses the situation. This causes the magnet to be accelerated, which speeds up the flywheel to its maximum velocity. More importantly, the battery gets charged during this process. A diode must be added to direct the charging current from the coil into the battery. In addition to the pulsed charging current generated when the magnetic field collapses and is amplified by the transistor, another charging current comes from a type of cold energy known as cold electricity. You should prepare multiple batteries and run the motor to charge them using cold electricity. At first glance, this system looks like it's just charging batteries from other batteries by using over-amplification and sudden circuit breakage. However, the output energy exceeds the input energy. Many experiments have confirmed this. There are various versions of this generator once its core principles are understood. Many people ask, where does free energy come from? In fact, the iron core becomes magnetized from zero to maximum, and then the magnetic field collapses as the magnet passes over, generating a reverse voltage spike that far exceeds the coil's normal maximum. But this spike is a sudden reverse pulse with extremely high amplitude. Why does this happen? According to Faraday's law, voltage is the derivative of magnetic flux over time. Since the magnetic field collapses from peak to zero at nearly the speed of light, the rate of flux change is massive, producing a huge voltage spike. That is free energy. Besides this type of energy, there is also cold electricity when the Hall IC is off. It charges batteries very effectively and can even reverse sulfation in old batteries. See how to harness both types of energy in my blog post on the ultimate off-grid generator. The cold electricity generated is actually longitudinal dielectric energy compressed into matter. In this case, the battery structure, boosting polarization potential and reversing sulfation. This is etheric energy, or in other words, longitudinal dielectric energy. Also, the voltage spike is another form of ether energy triggered by the field collapse. Let me be perfectly clear. What modern electrical engineers have failed to grasp, and I say this not out of contempt, but out of deep frustration, is that energy is not moving particles, but coherent pressure mediation within the dielectric field. The so-called cold electricity observed in this system is not mystical, nor is it exotic. It is dielectric energy, compressive ether flow, coherently discharged into the medium of the battery. The battery isn't charged in the classical sense. It is polarized by a longitudinal stress wave in the ether, made possible through the sudden collapse of inductive magnetism. The fools of modern academia have mistaken effects for causes. the collapsing magnetic field does not generate energy. It releases stored dielectric inertia back into the field structure. This is the same inertia that was originally displaced by the magneto-dielectric interaction in the coil core system. When that field collapses and the magnetic permeability returns to null, a tremendous dielectric rebound occurs. A compression wave, not a transverse EM wave. That's why it appears as a spike and not as a sinusoidal wave. That's not electricity in the Maxwellian sense. It's pure ether pressure. Once you abandon the mathematical obfuscation and observe the field's geometry directly, you begin to see that the act of magnetizing an iron core is not merely about aligning domains or inducing current. It is a direct modulation of the atomic precessional inertia. The core is not passive. It is active. Its atoms are coherently reoriented by dielectric pressure. And when that coherent alignment collapses, it is not just the magnetic field that vanishes, but the very inertial state of the atoms that snaps back. This reversal, this implosion of field tension, is where the so-called missing secrets of magnetism lie. The collapsing field is not a side effect. It is the event. It is in that moment that the ether expresses its recoil, and energy emerges not from movement, but from a shift in atomic potential. Proof that magnetism is not a force, but a consequence of dielectric displacement.